All right, welcome back, everyone. So I wanted to dive a bit more into the Asgard piece. I have no so if you're looking for actual insider knowledge or anything like that, I have none of that. Right, this is just strictly spitballing completely. So if you're looking for a video with some sort of deeper dive that actually knows something more than has been shown, there's nothing here. Right, we don't have that yet. I expect we can have more of that in a little over a month's time. After I imagine they'll bring it up during Fleet Week. If not, we at least know it exists, so it looks like it would come out at some point. That being said, without those details, I still want to kind of spitball and kind of discuss what I think or what I hope it is. It's still up in the air, but let's take a look here at some of the carriers currently in game. So I just recently did a video as well about the Asgard. It was found in the game files. So at this point, it's kind of confirmed that it'll be around, or at least it's a ship in lore and in the verse, and we suspect it will be something that will be announced at a later date, possibly during Fleet Week here. So here's some of the details, at least from the its discussion as a heavy transport from the game files.
Deploying the Navy's heavy hitters to where they're needed most requires a heavy-duty transport, like the fleet's latest addition, the Anvil Aerospace Asgard.
All right. So that is the details about the heavy transport that will be the Anvil Asgard. So the question begins with I want to talk a little bit about lore. I am not any kind of like major scholar on lore, so this is just largely based off what I found. And the Valkyrie is that leading example here because it's our first kind of anvil piece that also has to do with Nordic lore, so with North mythology. So its role is to select warriors that die in battle to go to Valhalla. So I think they also transport them to other places, it looks like, but obviously most people are most familiar with taking those that are fallen, slain warriors to Valhalla. So it is meant to be a transport, right? And in this case, ideally, these warriors, I mean, may make their way to Valhalla, but that's not really the goal. It's just to take them to a current location. So there is something to take off of. Like there's a bite there with that name. So that's kind of where this all kicked off from. So I'm going to remove this because it's not a carrier, right? So that's not really the intent here. Um, so let's go back up to what Asgard is. So Asgard is obviously it's listed in Marvel as well and that cinematic universe because of Thor and some of those other things. But I'm going to talk about the Norse piece of it. So it's one of the 9 realms in Norse mythology, which does I think kind of align with what's going on with Marvel as well. So I don't know how much they fully align. I'm not super into the Marvel universe as well as again I'm not super into Norse mythology, but I just want to discuss what I found. So it's a celestial stronghold for quite a few of the gods. So like Odin, obviously, and Thor. So it's depicted as a fortified city in the heavens. So it's connected to Midgard by the Rainbow Bridge, the Bifrost, which again, a lot of that stuff all shows up in Marvel Universe as well. So guarded by Heimdall. There's all kinds of lore based on that as well, but it's no small thing. So that's where I wanted to talk about ships a little bit. So currently, this is the breadth, if you will, of both carrier for vehicles of ships and carriers of vehicles themselves, something like a Nova tank. So the M2 and the Ironclad Assault are going to be, you can kind of put the Ironclad here as well. So it kind of fits in both realms a little bit. This is really a stretch here, much like the Idris will be here in a minute when we talk about it. So this is not meant to have a carrier role, but it does kind of fit in that. Obviously, a lot of ships, the hangar in the Polaris is another good example. You could treat ships as carriers more so than they're really meant to be. But in a lot of ways, these two are obviously meant to actually be vehicle carriers. This has a deck on it for repairing vehicles, and it's strictly meant to be. I mean, that's one of its primary purposes, if you will. M2, a very similar situation here where it's meant to carry large military type vehicles. So it does appear that Crusader does have some history there. So there's a ship in lore here, it looks like it's the Jupiter ship, and it doesn't have any pictures, I think, of that nature, but it's meant to be a ship carrier manufactured by Crusader as well. So there's a bit of lore there around Crusader having some military prowess to them and the ability to actually take ships into combat and have combat prowess. So the Nova tank here is just kind of for reference here. You can see, I know there's been pictures of a couple Nova tanks in the assault, so it can carry a few. Ironclad is very similar, so I suspect it can do the same thing. So I, I I don't know. A lot of people obviously think there's a chance that it could be a vehicle carrier, and that's kind of what it alludes to. Let's listen to the audio again really quick, and let me know, if you think down below, if you think it'll be something that carries ships, or if you think it'll be something that carries vehicles.
Deploying the Navy's heavy hitters to where they're needed most requires a heavy duty transport, like the fleet's latest addition, the Anvil Aerospace Asgard.
Yeah, so it it talks about the fleet carrying vehicles, so it's hard to say if that means it's going to be a large carrier of some sort. And that's when we get into the conversation. If you think it will be something to carry around Nova tanks, then we're looking at another ship that is similar to Liberator, for Anvil, which to me that doesn't quite make sense. So let me get rid of the Ironclad here because it's no longer really the focus. The focus now is, do you think it will fit in? How does it compete against the Liberator? Because at this point, it's now looking like just a Liberator counterpart. So the question should be, will we see an update? I mean, this is really what I want to see. I would want to see an update to the Liberator on Fleet Week. And to go along with that is, how does the Asgard compete in that space? Because if you just make it a vehicle carrier similar to the M2, you can see how this itself can carry about 3 vehicles. It can actually carry more than that, because if you want to, you can put them on the top up here as well. So these two are already fairly competitive in nature. So it wouldn't make sense to me to see, I don't know, Anvil releasing another Liberator essentially. It could be a variant of the Liberator, that maybe just does vehicles. I wouldn't mind that. I mean, ships instead of vehicles, or just does vehicles, and maybe they redo the Liberator. I wouldn't mind at all if they want to upsize the Liberator and have it just carry a bunch more aircraft and more ships. I would be down with that. But it's hard to say without an update from the on the Liberator, and with the Asgard coming out. I would really like to hear how they differentiate, because it'd be different story if it was at least a different manufacturer. But given they're the exact same manufacturer, there has to be something differentiation between the two. And again, this already kind of fills the M2 goal. Like it kind of fits, it meets that particular demand. So I don't know how they can make it so that there's a justification for the Asgard and the Liberator. I just don't see it. So it's possible, but we'll have to see, obviously, once they release the details. That being said, obviously you can fit, a couple small fighters up here. They're meant to be like Gladius. It can also fit at some industrial ships such as the Misfortune and the. I mean, it should be able to fit the Misfortune because it's already been confirmed they can carry the Prospector. So I've already done a pretty long video about that covers, if you want to go back and take a look at that for the Liberator, it does cover a bunch of the details originally discussed around the Liberator. And they already have quite a bit of assets supposedly built out by a contractor. Then somebody did leave a comment, thank you for that, about the fact it sounds like they did hire that contractor at the end of the day. So those assets got to be somewhere. So there is something going on with the Liberator. I would love an update on that. And but that does kind of hurt. I mean, it seems like these newer ships, such as the Ironclad, it seems like if they release them, they get working on them almost immediately. So, with that kind of going off of that, I would be much more interested in returning the Liberator and getting the Asgard if it's something I'm looking for, which would be more along the lines of a carrier, a more traditional carrier. So that goes into the conversation of, well, where does the Liberator fit currently, and where does it compete with what's going to be made available in the short term? So obviously the Kraken is meant to be also a carrier. So these two are the most carrier, if you will, in the verse. And then the Idris does have a component where it does have a hangar. So you can see here I've got a hangar out, and you can see that it fits easily 3 small fighters, no problem. I can actually get a Vulture to fit in here as well, which means the Prospector fits fine. So I know Foxy Loxy did a video on that. I tried doing a video on that with fitting what I could in the ship, and I ended up having that ship despawn. So I never got around to capturing another one to do that video. But quite a bit can actually fit in the Idris. But the Idris is a frigate, which in modern terms, as far as I understand it, is meant to be like an escort, a very versatile ship, much like the Polaris as well. It doesn't really fill any one particular role, but it's more of a master of none, if you will. It's not meant to necessarily carry. In this case, it does carry ships, and I think that's largely just because of Squadron 42 for storytelling capabilities, like as a storytelling device, if you will. So that's why you typically see this particular ship used more as a carrier. But again, from the larger terms, it's not really a dedicated carrier. So yeah, so these are kind of the 3 ships that are more or less used to kind of talk about carrier gameplay. Again, not really meant to be a big carrier. I mean, just by comparison, this smaller Liberator can almost carry the same amount of ships that the Idris can. Yes, you can get more in the Idris. Obviously, it has a bigger, landing surface area, but just out of the sheer size, right? It just shows how much to scale this is not really meant to be a carrier. So, I mean, take that what you will. Obviously, share your comment, your feedback below. But obviously, the Kraken is a big carrier. This is meant to be a carrier. That's what it's built for. That's what it's all about. So you can fit quite a bit more on here. It has two medium pads. You can see I put a Vulcan on here as well as the Cuddy Black. And then I've got a Super Hornet, and then I've got the other ships that I showed before. So this is a Gladius. We have a Gladius here. We have another Hornet. I think I have the F7A here. And then we have the Gladiator. So just a good broad ability to carry ships into combat. And I think this needs a good competitor. Also, I think it needs to come out. So that's two parts to it, right? I want to see this ship, and I also want to see more competition with this ship. And this is, I think, more of the standard carrier people want to see. So if Anvil's going to release something, I would love to see it in this size class. Because comparatively, what other ships carry ships? So that is going to lead to the Bengal, which is just such a size class outside the realm of scale, and it's not something they're selling, right? So you're not going to be able to purchase this particular ship. There's also the King ship. So let's take a look at the Bengal first. The Bengal is, um, you know, 990 meters long, so it's definitely a very big ship, and it's currently being worked on because of Squadron 42, and that's where this is kind of being discussed. Additionally, there's the King ship, which is actually the Van Duel version of their carrier, but it's actually significantly longer even. Obviously, these two appear in the trailer, and this is listed being almost 3 times the size of the Bengals. So like the scale of those ships comparatively compared to what we have here. So I've lined up just the Idris, the Kraken, and the Liberator alone, and they still don't even meet. I mean, I've got them spaced out even, and they don't even meet the behemoth we have here. So yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I don't necessarily think people. I mean, I'd like to see the ship, right? I'd like to own the ship, but I think from a sense of scale, both in cost and just viability, I get that not everybody can be flying this around like they do right now with their Polaris. That's just not It's not good. Not that it's not good gameplay. I mean, it really isn't because there's just too much going on with it. I understand the fun of it, and I would be cool to like take part in an event like that with such a ship, but it's just not feasible, right? And again, it would be cool. I'm all down for it, but our systems, like our game systems, can barely. I mean, my system is struggling. It's a modern computer, and it's struggling just with kind of having all these images out alone, let alone trying to deal with this in a game, rendered in a game, and trying to play around it, right? So anyways, all that being said, like right now, I think when the Bengal's probably there, it probably has no interior, and that's why it's easier to render it in. Um, but yeah, the having the Idris here, I think is great. Having the Kraken it would be great, and then having the Liberator is also good. But I'd love to see more competition in the carrier realm, and I think adding another larger carrier as the Asgard that would actually be a competitor. It would be more than a competitor to Liberator because right now it's just the Liberator doesn't need a competitor. We just need the Liberator. So I think the idea again, if we listen to this audio just one last time, where do we think this particular ship will fit? And when it's referring to naval heavy transport, is it talking about just heavy ground vehicles, which it could be, but again, the Liberator does quite a bit of that as it is. So what is it referring to when it's talking about these heavy ships?
Deploying the Navy's heavy hitters to where they're needed most requires a heavy-duty transport, like the fleet's latest addition, the Anvil Aerospace Asgard.
So I mentioned this in another previous video, but I would love them to actually have a Marines division because that would help differentiate between land vehicles and air vehicles. Maybe they don't have that for this particular reason, but I'd love them to be able to refer to transporting Marine vehicles, like having the Nova tank as a Marine vehicle, because again, when you have a Navy, you usually have a department of the Navy that's going to be the Marines, and from there, the Marines do the groundwork, right? They do the heavy lifting on the ground because that's what they're there for. The Navy's there to support them. So without that differentiation in this game, it's hard to tell what naval assets is referring to. When it says heavy transport, obviously this is a heavy transport for the for the Navy. So wordplay is afoot here. But the heavy transport this can do versus the heavy transport this can do are very different things, right? Again, this can fit, inside of this ship. Like obviously, I don't think it'll actually be able to fit in here. I mean, it might be able to. If this bay can open up, it's possible the Liberator could actually fit in there. But just the heavy transport you're bringing to bear, you're bringing heavy tanks and things like that in the Liberator. This is a landing craft, much like in the American Navy, right? When you're talking about what the Liberator is here, which is much more akin to a floating amphibious vehicle, that's what this is offering. Well, that floating amphibious vehicle doesn't just sell the shores to its shores by itself. It's brought in a bigger amphibious craft, which, well, I don't even. I'm getting into the weeds here of stuff I don't actually know more about, but I know there's a whole naval craft with that these kind of equivalent liberators would fit into. Those amphibious craft are put inside. They're docked inside these big naval ships. So when you talk about bringing heavy transport to bear, in this case, there's ships loaded into the Liberator loaded into a bigger ship. So how big of a transport are we talking here? And if it's something, I don't think it's going to be something like the Bengal. If it is, I mean, it's interesting. It would be cool to see a Bengal competitor, but then we'll never really get that in our hands. So really, in a feasible standpoint, it would need to be something like a Kraken or an Idris capital ship. So seeing an Anvil capital ship really is what we're looking for here, because currently they don't have a capital ship, and I think it would be a great opportunity to bring one in. Anyways, let me know what your thoughts are down below. I just wanted to kind of dive into this a little more theory crafting than just standard. We don't know much than we do now, but I'm looking forward to more discussions on this and more details, to be honest. So hopefully there will be more details during Fleet Week. We don't know if there will or will not be, but I appreciate those taking time to watch the video, and I'll catch y'all next time. Peace.